and welcome to StudyIQ. In the last session, we have seen what is patent and the Indian patent law. In this session, let us discuss about the Doha Development Agenda. But before we move on to the Doha Development Agenda, let us see what is WTO and what is the Ministerial Conference of the WTO. First, let us see what is WTO. WTO stands for World Trade Organization. It was established in the year 1995. The predecessor of WTO was the GATT, GATT, which stands for General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So GATT was the predecessor of the WTO. At present, there are 164 members in the World Trade Organization. So the present number of members are 164 in the World Trade Organization. One important thing to be noted is the decisions in the World Trade Organization are made by consensus. So decisions are made by consensus. Hope now you have a brief idea about what World Trade Organization is. Now let us see what is a Ministerial Conference in the World Trade Organization. Ministerial Conference. The Ministerial Conference in the World Trade Organization is the highest decision-making body of the World Trade Organization. You must remember this point. It is the highest decision-making body of the WTO. The members of this Ministerial Conference are represented by the trade ministers and senior level officers from various countries. So the members are trade ministers and senior officials. So in case of India, the Commerce Minister is the representative at the Ministerial Conference of the WTO. It should meet at least once in 2 years. So the meeting of the Ministerial Conference must be necessarily held at least once in 2 years. So the first Ministerial Conference was held in Singapore in the year 1996. 1996, Singapore. If we take the recent ministerial conferences, the 2013 ministerial conference was held in Bali. It was the 9th ministerial conference. The 10th ministerial conference of the WTO was held in Nairobi in the year 2015 and it was the 10th ministerial conference. The 11th ministerial conference of the WTO was held in the year 2017. 11th Ministerial Conference of the WTO was held in the year 2017 in Buenos Aires. The 9th Ministerial Conference in 2013 in Bali. The 10th in the year 2015 in Nairobi. And the 11th in the year 2017 Buenos Aires. So this is in brief about the WTO and the Ministerial Conference of the WTO. In today's lecture, we will be discussing about the 4th Ministerial Conference which was held in Doha in the year 2001. Doha Development Agenda. In 2001, in the 4th Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization which was held in Doha, 2 main declarations were accepted by the members. The first one is known as the Doha Development Agenda and the second one was related to the agreement on TRIPS, that is Trade Related Intellectual Property Rights. Let us see what are the main provisions of this Doha Development Agenda. First, let us see how the Doha Development Agenda has benefited the developing countries like India. So, the developing countries like India, how it has benefited. The first benefit for the developing countries like India was that a new clause was added to the TRIPS. A new clause was added to the TRIPS. Trade related intellectual property rights, a new clause was added. And this clause was known as TRIPS versus public health. Public health. This is a very important clause. This is very important. We will discuss this clause in detail later in this module itself. The second one was related to the agricultural subsidies. Agricultural subsidies. Before we discuss what were the negotiations made in this Doha Development Agenda, let us first understand what are these agricultural subsidies by the WTO. The WTO or the World Trade Organization identifies agricultural and agricultural product subsidies in various boxes. So we must understand 3 main boxes here. The first one is blue box, second one is green box and the third one is amber box. Amber box. The first one is a green box. In the green box we have the non-trade distorting subsidies or minimum distortion is created by the subsidies. Non distortion subsidies, distortion, or minimum distortion subsidies. What does this mean? It means that it does not distort the trade, or it has minimum distortion on the trade. This is mainly a government funded subsidy. This is a government funded subsidy. These type of subsidies, that is the green box subsidies, include direct income support to the farmers for their crop loss or for some disasters, or when the market breaks down, the farmers will incur losses. So these subsidies are given in order to get a relief from such losses. So this includes direct subsidies to farmers, direct income support subsidies to farmers for crop loss, or for market breakdown, etc. Means when the prices in the market comes down, the farmers will incur loss, and in order to support the farmers in such a situation, subsidies are given. And in case of disasters also, farmers will incur loss, and in order to minimize the losses due to disasters also, the government would provide some subsidies. All these kinds of subsidies are included in the non-trade distortion category, that is the green box of the WTO subsidies. Environmental and conservation programs, research programs, etc. Training to farmers, etc. So in short, green box subsidies means those subsidies which are non-trade distorting. That means it has minimum distortion or no distortion on trade. And these are provided by the government. And WTO has not set any limit for the subsidies. That means the WTO has not set up any limit. The government can give this subsidies to its citizens. Next is the amber box subsidies. Amber box. Amber box subsidies are international trade distorting subsidies. Green box subsidies, we said they are non-distorting, but amber box is distorting, trade distorting subsidies. Trade distorting subsidies. They distort international trade. Let us see how amber box subsidies distort international trade. For example, if a particular country is giving subsidies to its producers or manufacturers, what will happen? They can produce the products at lesser cost. That means they can supply this cost. That means they can supply these products in the international market at cheaper cost. So what will happen? When these products reach the international market at cheaper cost, these products will have higher demand. It means that it will affect the products of other countries. So this is how amber box subsidies are trade distorting. So the implication is that the products from a particular country will be cheaper in the international market, and they will have higher demand, which will negatively or badly affect the product of other countries. This would distort the trade balance by making excessive production. So this will distort the trade balance by excessive production. Examples of such kind of subsidies or the amber box subsidies are subsidies on fertilizers, subsidies on electricity, or the minimum support price given by the government to the farmers, etc. comes under this category. An important point to be noted here is that WTO has set up limits for these subsidies. So WTO has set limits for these kinds of subsidy, amber box subsidies. In case of developed countries, it is 5% of the agricultural production, and in case of developing countries, it is 10% of the agricultural production. So in short, amber box subsidies means trade distorting subsidies. That means it affects the international trade. So if a country gives amber box subsidies to its manufacturers or to the producers, the production becomes less costly and products become cheaper in the international market. This would negatively affect the international trade balance by making commodities of a particular country cheaper in the international market. And here you must understand that WTO has set up a limit for these subsidies. Next is the blue box subsidies. Blue box subsidies aim at limiting the production. So the limiting production is the purpose of blue box subsidies. Usually the amber box subsidies are placed in the blue box in order to limit their production. Only a few countries in the world has adopted this blue box subsidy. Example of countries that has adopted this kind of subsidies are Norway, Iceland, etc. Hope green box, amber box and blue box subsidies are clear for all of you. So coming back to our topic, that is the decisions of the Doha Development Agenda regarding the agricultural subsidies. First we discussed about the TRIPS. That is the new clause added to the TRIPS that we said we will discuss later. The second one was regarding the agricultural subsidies. So the second negotiation made in the Doha Development Agenda was regarding the agricultural subsidies. Agricultural subsidies. We have already seen what are the different types of agricultural subsidies under the World Trade Organization. So let us now see what was the negotiation made regarding the agricultural subsidies. Usually developed countries give more subsidies, but under this negotiation the developed countries agreed to the developing countries that they will reduce their subsidies. So what is the implication of reducing subsidies in the developed countries? When the developed countries reduce their subsidies, it means that the producers in those countries will have to incur more cost. So the production will come down. So international trade will be benefited. The third negotiation was regarding the differential, preferential, special treatment. Third one, differential, preferential, special treatment. This was agreed by the developed countries to the developing countries. There were two clauses under this. The first one was that in case of subsidies or import duties, the developed countries will reduce the subsidies or the import duties. And the second clause was that in case of developing countries, more time period will be given in order to comply with these negotiations. So the first one, subsidies or import duties. Import duties. The developed countries said that they will reduce the import duties or the subsidies. So, and the second clause was regarding the time frame for implementation. Time for implementation. The developed countries agreed that they will give more time for developing countries for their implementation. The fourth negotiation was related to the labor issues. Labor issues. In the fourth ministerial conference, that was the Doha Development Agenda, the member countries decided that the labor related issues will not be taken care by the WTO or the World Trade Organization, but instead ILO will take care of the labor related issues. This was another negotiation in the fourth ministerial conference. So we were discussing about the favorable negotiations for the developing countries in the fourth ministerial conference. They were the first one, a new clause was added in the trade related intellectual property rights. The second was related to agricultural subsidies. The third one was related to the differential, preferential, special status given for the developing countries by the developed countries, under which the subsidies and the import duties will be reduced by the developed countries, and developing countries were given more time for implementation. Fourth one was related to the labor issues. Labor issues. It was decided that the labor issues will not be taken by the World Trade Organization. Instead, ILO will take care of the labor issues. All these four negotiations were highly favorable for the developing countries like India. Now let us see what are the negotiations which favored the developed countries in this conference. Developed countries. The first one was that new round of negotiations were started. New round of negotiations were started. The second one is that the developing countries agreed to reduce the duty on industrial goods. The third one was that the Singapore issues were taken by the board. The fourth one was regarding the environmental concerns, and WTO will take care of the environmental concerns. Environmental concerns. These were the important negotiations under the Doha Development Agenda. The important factors you must remember here is these negotiations were inclusive, development oriented. But later on what happened was that the developed countries had withdrawn from these negotiations or agreements. Later on, developed countries withdrew from these agreements. For example, some countries are restricting Indian products on the basis of labor issues. So these are all violation of these agreements.